Hi, nice to meet you, man. This is such a highlight of this channel, you know. It's just it's one of the highest moments. I'm very, very proud to have you here.
Oh, that's very cool. I'm thrilled to be here, man.
My story with you guys just goes back a long time, because when I first listened to your album, it was right after reading the book, and the book itself was just amazing to me. It just, you know, it's a life-changing experience in a way. And I'm not a junkie, and so I can only imagine how life-changing it can be with people who are actually junkies. It's got to be, you know, one of the things that can make Nikki so proud to be an ambassador of all this. But when I first listened to the album, I was telling the other guys, I was very... I don't know. I wasn't sure. I was just about to listen to something good. It felt kind of weird. So I said, okay, let's just listen to this. You know, I just had this huge hype from the book. And then I listened to it, and I was amazed by your voice, by the songwriting and the production. And it all sounded awesome. And I loved the album. The album became my new passion right after the book. So congratulations for all of that, and for the rest of your career with Sixx A.M. But I just want to go back in time and ask you, how did you get involved with Nikki in the making of this album?
Right. Well, first off, thank you. I'm so glad that the record had that kind of an impact. It certainly is a surprise to us every time we hear a story like that, because we were just so experimental at the time, and we had no intention of ever becoming a band or making several follow-up records to that. We were just three guys that really liked hanging out together, that were just in the throes of the music industry and just experiencing all sorts of crazy things in all of our careers. And it just seemed like the right time for the three of us to get together and just mess around with some ideas, you know, just toss some ideas back and forth with absolutely no expectations. So to be able to sit here, you know, over a decade later and hear you say that and have those conversations, it's always so gratifying, because we really did not expect any of this. We didn't expect anything that followed. We didn't even think we'd even have a song on the radio, ever. So everything since then has just been icing on the cake. But to your question, the way that it all came about was I had signed a solo record deal with a company called Beyond Music at the end of the 90s. It was in the late 90s. I think it was 1999. It just so happens that Mötley Crüe was also on Beyond Music at the time, and they were getting ready to make their next record. And there was some tension in the band. They weren't all getting along as well as they had in the past. And so Nikki reached out to me because he had heard my solo record just through people at the label. Yeah. And I guess he had really been taken by the writing and the production on that. So he called me and said, would you be interested in writing some Mötley Crüe songs? Because right now I'm not doing a lot of writing with Tommy. I'm not writing with the other guys, but we want to make another record. So I want to get this process started. Well, me just being a young kid and you know, kind of starry-eyed, of course I said, absolutely. So he and I got together, and just immediately we could tell there was something there. There was chemistry there. We just, the way that we were tossing ideas back and forth. I think we wrote 3 songs in that very first day together.
James, we'll keep it from there. I need to translate a bit of this. Actually, all of this. I'll try to make it as fast as possible. So just hold that thought. We'll get back to it in a second. Allora, voglio tradurre per tutte le persone che non parlano inglese. Ho chiesto per farla breve, ho chiesto a James come è nato la sua collaborazione con Nikki Sixx. Allora, in quel periodo lui lavorava con una casa discografica chiamata Beyond, e la stessa Beyond Records era quella che stava per pubblicare il nuovo disco dei Mötley Crüe. Però c'erano delle tensioni, delle frizioni all'interno della band, e quindi Nikki non si sentiva particolarmente sicuro. Aveva appena pubblicato un album solista, James, credo il suo primo album solista, e praticamente venne contattato da Nikki Sixx, che chiese: mi aiuti a scrivere un po' di materiale, mi aiuti a lavorare insieme a quattro mani a questo materiale. Si misero a lavorare insieme e praticamente già dalle prime canzoni, che furono 3, iniziarono a capire che la storia era una storia bella. Chiederò adesso a James quale fossero le 3 canzoni e da lì in poi come si andò a sviluppare il lavoro. Ok, James, I think I made it in a much quicker time, but
it sounds so much cooler when you say it than when I say it.
yeah, but actually the way you described it was way more effective than the way I translated it. So okay, back to those 3 tracks. What were the tracks, and how did you move from there on to the making of the album?
Yeah, I think those first 3 tracks that we wrote for the new Tattoo record, Mötley Crüe's new Tattoo album, and I think the 3 songs that we wrote that first day were Drag Strip Superstar. There was one called God Drives a UFO,
okay,
which ended up being changed to She Needs Rock and Roll. But Nikki and I always loved God Drives a UFO way better than She Needs Rock and Roll. And to be honest with you, I can't remember what the third one was. But to answer your question, it was at that point on that very first day that we realized that we need to do more work together. It can't just end with this Mötley Crüe record. And so we scheduled more writing sessions where we would write for other artists. We wrote some stuff for some country artists. We wrote some stuff for Meatloaf. We just really hit it off as far as writing together. And at some point during that following year, while we were still working on New Tattoo and while we were writing songs for other artists, we thought, you know, we should. He had started kind of looking through his memoirs, through his diaries at the time, because he had found them in a storage
Did he
space.
show you his diary?
He did.
Did he ask you to read it?
Yeah, he did, and we would read through it together. He gave me some manuscripts from it, and
how did you feel about it? What was your first reaction?
Well, it was heavy. You know, it was disturbing, and it was exciting, and I just felt like I was getting a very private glimpse into a very public person's life. So it was a little uncomfortable because I was establishing, at the time, I was establishing a friendship with Nikki, and the person that I met and knew really did not resemble the person that I was reading about in these memoirs, because he had you know, gone through so much recovery since then. So it was unusual. I would be going home and reading these transcripts at night and just thinking, my gosh, what a crazy, crazy life. I can't even believe this guy is still alive. And then during the day, we would be together writing songs. So it was a very strange kind of, it was a very strange time in my life, because I was really getting to know 2 very different Nikkis, the Nikki of today and the Nikki in that book. So it was unusual, to say the least.
So pardon me, James, I'm going to translate all this in 30 seconds. Allora, il disco per cui hanno iniziato a lavorare ovviamente era New Tattoo dei Mötley Crüe. Lavorano a 3 canzoni con anche poi, vabbè, adesso non vi sto a spiegare, ve lo dirà magari dopo Joe, con anche una canzone che ha un titolo di lavorazione diverso da quello che poi avrà alla fine, ma diciamo che si trovano immediatamente bene, c'è un click immediato fra di loro, tant'è che l'idea è proprio quella di continuare a lavorare insieme, ed è proprio in quel momento che Nikki mostra le sue memorie, il suo diario a James, e gli ho chiesto qual è stata la tua reazione alla lettura di quel diario? E lui mi ha detto, la reazione fu molto, molto strana, perché stavo costruendo la mia amicizia con Nikki in quel periodo, e quindi vedevo davanti a me una persona completamente diversa rispetto a quella di cui leggevo in quel diario. Me lo ritrovavo davanti a me praticamente nudo in una narrazione così intima, così profonda, e quindi questa cosa chiaramente portandomi a casa il diario e leggendo, continuando a leggere queste pagine, mi creava una sensazione sicuramente di diciamo di scomfort rispetto al lavoro che dovevamo fare insieme. Okay, James, so when exactly the whole idea of having a soundtrack for the book came about, and where did you start from? Did Nikki had any of the tracks that ended up in the album already written, or was it like something that you had to build up from scratch?
It was something that we built up from scratch. And just to go back a little bit, so he and I initially started having some conversations about the idea of creating a soundtrack to this book. But then what happened is we both got very busy with other things, and we kind of put that on the back burner for a couple of years. So, and then what happened was about 2 or 3 years later, I got a call from Nikki, and he said, "Hey, remember when we were talking about doing this soundtrack to my diaries?" He says, "I've got a guitar player now. I found this guy, DJ Ashba, and I think this might be the right time for us to actually sit down and do this." So it was a couple years later that we all got together, and we really did start from scratch. He and Nikki had been working on a few ideas together, but we really just wanted to get in a room, the three of us, and start writing and see what happens. You know, just so we really did start that process from scratch, having no idea what would happen. And I think the first day that we all three were together, I believe we wrote "Life is Beautiful," or at least we wrote the first part of "Life."
Who brought the riff for it?
DJ wrote the opening riff. Of course.
Who wrote the harmony?
The melodies were pretty much me at that point. I was writing all of the melodies, and the song was originally called "Funeral," and I remember driving out to the session, and I remember thinking, and I was just singing lines in the car, and I remember thinking, I'm not sure people want to hear a song called "Funeral." I think we need to find some hope in this. And that's when I came up with the idea for, you know, just open your eyes and see that life is beautiful. I wanted to focus on the life part of this, not on the death part of it.
Which is pretty much the opposite of a funeral.
Yeah. So when I got there that day, I remember just singing, "Hey guys, what do you think of this? What do you think of alive? Just open your eyes and see that life is beautiful." And then they loved it, and I said, and then we can use "funeral" at the end of the chorus by, you know, just by saying that nobody cries at my funeral. So we can get that nice rhyme scheme between beautiful and funeral, which is a loose rhyme, but it all just kind of came together then. So back in those days, we really did each bring something unique to the table. DJ was really good at creating these riffs. I was, of course, as a singer, I was more of a melody guy. And Nikki, of course, was very, very focused on lyrics.
Ok, allora, praticamente passano 2 anni da quel momento in cui decidono di lavorare insieme, perché sono tanti gli impegni che li dividono, e quindi decidono a un certo punto, anzi James riceve la chiamata di Nick che gli dice: perché non riprendiamo il lavoro che abbiamo lasciato in sospeso? In realtà non avevano ancora scritto niente, infatti la mia domanda era questa: avete scritto, cioè siete partiti da zero nella costruzione delle canzoni? E la risposta è stata sì, siamo partiti completamente da zero. E allora Nick, dopo 2 anni, ribussa a casa di James dicendo: ho trovato un chitarrista, si chiama DJ Ashba e potrebbe fare al caso nostro. E l'idea di James è quella di convogliare tutti i membri dei futuri Sixx A.M, che al momento non hanno ancora un nome, dentro una sala prove, dentro uno studio, per cercare di scrivere. E la session di composizione diciamo dà alla luce immediatamente Life is Beautiful, quindi praticamente il singolo portante di questo album. Ho chiesto chi avesse scritto cosa, e la parte di riff fu scritta da DJ Ashba, la parte di melodie, quindi armonica, invece fu scritta scelta da James, e stranamente il lavoro in questo caso di Nikki non è pervenuto, ed è curioso, sarà la prossima domanda che gli farò, proprio quella, no? Nikki che scrive tutto per i Mötley Crüe, ma poi qui quanto poi effettivamente andrà a scrivere, quanto poi sarà un lavoro d'ensemble. Quello che succede è che bisogna lavorare al testo. Il titolo di lavorazione di Life is Beautiful in realtà è Funeral, che si fa rima con Beautiful, però in realtà è una canzone sulla quale James ha dei dubbi e dice: chi è che vuole sentire una canzone che canta il funerale? Perché non ci concentriamo sulla parte non della morte ma sulla parte della vita, e quindi dire la vita è bella, life is beautiful, senza dover parafrasare per forza Benigni. E quindi inizia a cantare questa melodia dicendo appunto, vedete, fa rima con Funeral, però in realtà il messaggio è totalmente positivo. G.J. Asbury, la sua capacità di scrivere i riff, crea poi quel riff meraviglioso, l'acustica, che è la parte portante del pezzo e che è la parte identificativa del brano, e diciamo che da lì in poi si va ad aprire una collaborazione, e quindi l'idea di scrivere tutto il resto. James, Nikki has always been the main songwriter for Mötley Crüe, but now you just told us that basically it was a teamwork. That it was teamwork that created the first founding stone of Sixx A.M. What happened afterwards? Like, how did you? What was the writing process like? Did Nikki had a lot of saying, and did he have a much bigger input that he had on the first session, or it kept being teamwork?
That's a great question. And it's something that a lot of people have wondered because of the fact that Nikki was always the main songwriter in Mötley Crüe. But in Sixx A.M., it was always from the very beginning, it was the three of us. It was always teamwork. And it didn't matter who brought in the ideas. In fact, on Heroin Diaries, there's 4 songs on that album that I had written by myself. They were originally intended for my solo album. And the song Van Nuys, the song Permission, let's see.
Accidents Can Happen, maybe?
No, Accidents was definitely the three of us. Dead Man's Ballet.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, so the point being is that the nice thing about Sixx A.M. is we were never precious about our own ideas. We always wanted the other guy's ideas. In fact, as Sixx A.M. progressed, I found myself enjoying singing melody lines that DJ or Nikki wrote even more than myself, just because they were fresh to me. I always knew what I would come up with. I was more interested in what they would come up with. And I think the same thing was in reverse. DJ would let me, write guitar parts, and there was never any preciousness about it. And I think that's what worked so well about Sixx A.M. is that we really wanted to push each other to come up with ideas. We never wanted to own it ourselves. We were never precious about it.
So you guys thought that 6 songs was the limit, and that you were not going to have a name for your band, right? When did that change?
Yeah, well, it's funny because they originally, when we started making the songs for Sixx A.M., like I said, we really had no intention of being a band. And as these songs started progressing and Nikki started sending them to the record label kept coming back and saying, these are really good songs. We want to try to get some of this stuff on the radio. And at the time, I was not even supposed to be the singer. I was just a writer, and I was just the producer of the band. And we were, at some point, if they decided they wanted to go and tour or make more music, we thought that we would audition singers, and I could go on with my producing and writing career, and they could go on and maybe start a band. So I was never supposed to be the singer in Sixx A.M., but because I sang all of the demos, by the time we got to the end of those songs, we just thought, this is going to be really hard to find somebody that can sing with this type of a range, because I do have a pretty broad vocal range. And so I wasn't even supposed to be the singer. And then one day the label called and said, listen, we're going to radio with the song Life is Beautiful. And so far it's really doing well at radio. You guys need to, start thinking of this as a band. So that really kind of shocked all of us. And it really took us a good year to kind of adjust to the idea that maybe we were actually a band and not just 3 guys writing songs together.
Ok, James, I'm gonna translate all of this. Ok,
Yeah.
allora, da quel momento in poi, quindi dalla scrittura di Life is Beautiful, vengono messe un po' di canzoni, ma sempre nell'ottica del teamwork, quindi non c'è un compositore prevalente. E in questa maniera ognuno aggiunge qualcosa, spesso scambiandosi anche i ruoli, quindi può essere che sia James a portare un riff invece che farlo DJ Ashba, oppure può essere DJ Ashba che possa portare una melodia. E in questa ottica di scambio iniziano a venire costruite tutte le altre canzoni e James porta sul piatto, anzi sul tavolo dei Sixx A.M, che al momento non hanno un nome e che non hanno nessuna intenzione di avere un nome, una serie di canzoni, 3-4 canzoni che lui aveva pensato per il suo lavoro solista. E queste canzoni, per esempio c'è Ben Nice, la canzone che abbiamo sentito all'inizio, Dead Man's Ballet, eccetera, sono 3-4 canzoni. Su questo continuano a scrivere e praticamente si lasciano dopo quasi un anno di scrittura con l'idea di ritornare ognuno al proprio lavoro. James non sa di essere il cantante, nel senso lui ha sicuramente cantato nei demo, ma nessuno gli ha mai detto che può essere il cantante, né lui si sente il cantante di Sixx A.M. Sarà soltanto attraverso l'abitudine a riascoltare le canzoni con la sua voce, il fatto che abbia un'estensione vocale molto alta, un range vocale molto alto, che poi porterà a pensare proprio a lui come scelta. Ed ecco che in quel momento il feedback che arriva dalle radio è un feedback ottimo, è quello che raccontava Joe prima, ovvero le radio iniziano a parlare molto bene e dicono: ragazzi, non scherziamo, bisogna fare un disco di tutto questo, dovete trovare un nome e quindi dovete in questa maniera cercare di portare a casa un lavoro. Obviously, you're a producer and a very good producer. Your resume had a lot of albums, a lot of collaborations with many artists. But one thing that struck me with this album was the fact that you didn't use a real drummer. And if you listen to the album, goddammit, even today, I'm pretty sure that I'm hearing a real drummer. There's a man behind it. So you had to program the whole thing, and you did it in an excellent way. It's quite rare to listen to rock albums or metal albums that don't have a real drummer. So who came up? Why did you come up with that idea? And was it hard to produce the album? Was it hard to give it a sound?
What a great question. I've always, because I've always been a multi-instrumentalist, and in my productions, I really take advantage of the fact that I can play all of the different instruments. But the drums are the one instrument where, I can set up a microphone right here and record playing guitar, but the drums are a little bit more difficult because I would have to have the drum set up in another room. I'd have to hit record, and then I'd have to run out there, put the headphones on, and play the drums to record. It just wasn't practical for me to be able to do that.
So was programming more practical?
Programming was more practical at that time. There were enough good programs like BFD and some of these other drum programs.
Can I ask you which program you use? That's a nerdy question, but I need to know now.
That's a great question. On that album, I used primarily BFD, and then what I did do is I layered in samples that I created. So
okay, so you had a library.
I did have a library, and there were particular songs like I think Courtesy Call. I was really looking for a very, very specific snare sound on that, so I actually got a snare and just recorded a sample of it until I got it to sound right, and then I would just layer it in, just like you do. Nowadays it's so common to program drums because there are such good applications out there for drum samples. But back then it was a little more challenging.
Allora, praticamente gli ho chiesto come ha affrontato la produzione del disco, perché lui aveva tanti credits come produttore, aveva lavorato con tanti artisti, però chiaramente mettere insieme questo scenario con una figura prevalente come quella di Nikki non deve essere stato sicuramente semplice. E gli ho chiesto una cosa: questo disco ha un'anomalia, una particolarità anche per i dischi del genere a cui fanno riferimento i Sixx A.M, ed è il fatto di non aver usato un batterista, ma di aver programmato interamente la batteria. E gli ho chiesto come mai questa questa scelta e tra l'altro è stata programmata con una maestria, gli ho detto che era una domanda da nerd, però con una maestria tale che non ti rendi conto che è una batteria programmata, ma sembra che ci sia veramente qualcuno dietro. Mi ha spiegato che ai tempi c'erano degli ottimi software e che con questi software era addirittura più semplice, forse più veloce il processo compositivo e di arrangiamento rispetto ad avere un batterista vero e avere tutto quanto microfonato. Quindi lavorare con un software come nel caso BFD, che era il programma che usò, si tradusse in una scelta comunque più veloce. Gli ho chiesto: ma come fa a essere più veloce programmare tutto? E lui mi ha spiegato che in realtà riusciva ad essere più semplice. La cosa meno semplice era quella di usare comunque una libreria di suoni che facessero sembrare molto più umano e meno meccanico quello che poi doveva essere il prodotto finale. Quindi andò a registrare dei sample reali che lui aveva, e in alcuni casi, per esempio come nella canzone Courtesy Call, prese proprio una rullante vero suonandoci sopra e poi andò ad inglobarlo. I find it quite hard to figure out why they had doubts about your voice, because one of the things that stood out in that album was your vocal technique. It's amazing, man. It's just I was listening to it again today. I haven't touched this album for quite a while. And I was thinking to myself, Jesus, this man sings like an eagle. It's amazing, man. It's just, and you're not even a singer. I mean, I read that you came from choir experience, like your formation was from choir, but I was like, just why did they doubt you? Why weren't they sure from the first moment that you were going to be the singer?
It wasn't really them that doubted me. It was me that doubted me.
Why?
I think they would have preferred that I just signed on as the singer from the beginning. But number one, I was really focusing hard on a producing career. I just produced the Scorpions. I was really focusing on studio life. So it wasn't really my goal at that point to be the singer in a band. But I'll tell you this, and I appreciate you saying that about my voice. I've always said I don't think of myself as a singer. At the very most, I think of myself as a vocalist. But I will tell you, the only reason that my voice works is because of the chemistry and the dynamics of Sixx A.M. If you take my voice out of Sixx A.M. and put it somewhere else, it doesn't sound nearly as good. It doesn't sound nearly as special, and it doesn't sound nearly as unique. So I believe that the qualities of my voice that you like and that other people have found that they like are because of the amazing textures that DJ and Nikki create around me, and the productions and the orchestrations that I did, and all of that stuff. I worked very hard to create a canvas on which my voice would actually work, because I'm just insecure about it. I've never felt good about my voice. So I appreciate you saying that, and I always appreciate it when people comment on my voice, but I certainly I want to go hide under a rock every time I hear my voice.
No, don't do that. Actually, I appreciate you find it, that courage to leave your voice there and sing on the album. Ok, I'm going to translate it. Gli ho chiesto come era possibile, se ascoltate questo disco, una delle cose che veramente spiccano è la voce di James, che è impressionante. E gli ho chiesto, ma come mai fino a quel momento non facevi il cantante? E come mai c'erano dei dubbi intorno alle tue capacità come cantante? Mi ha risposto che in realtà i dubbi non venivano dagli altri, ma venivano più che altro da se stesso, che non si vedeva come un cantante, al limite si vedeva come un vocalist, e tutt'oggi crede di essere appunto al massimo un vocalist e non di essere un cantante. E è stato proprio il tessuto sonoro costruito dal resto della band che gli ha permesso, come se fosse una tela, no? Su cui poi andare a mettere le sue tracce di pennello vocale, è stato quello che poi gli ha creato appunto la sicurezza per poi poter affrontare il lavoro. A un certo punto loro portano il tutto dal vivo, e dal vivo onestamente le cose si fanno sul serio, intanto perché lui deve trovare un ruolo anche da frontman, ma poi voglio sapere in tutto questo processo quanto ingombrante fosse la presenza di Nikki, che improvvisamente da semplice rockstar è una rockstar ambasciatrice. So then he had to take the whole thing live. once you finished it. So first you had to work on your presence, you know, as a frontman of that band.
Yeah.
And then, and how big a presence was Nikki's in this whole process? Because every time I see the Crüe Fest bootlegs or lives or live videos, he's always, you know, on the side. He's not taking center stage. He's leaving you center stage. So how did you deal with Nikki suddenly being an ambassador and not just a rock star?
Well, it really, I'm glad you noticed that, because that really spoke to his personality and his understanding that that Sixx A.M. was going to be something very different than Mötley Crüe. And it always took me by surprise too, how humble he was and how he didn't want to take center stage when it came to Sixx A.M. He still wanted to be off to the side. He wanted to allow the front man to be the front man. And so, but what was so exciting about that was because of the incredible wealth of experience that Nikki had, I got a crash course in how to front a band, you know, because he had so much experience with that. So before we went out on Crüe Fest, you know, in rehearsals, he would just give me advice on stage presence and on how to, you know, how to utilize the whole stage, how to create shapes on stage, and all of this stuff. He was just a wealth of knowledge when it came to that. So, but you can see that the transition from the very early shows to, say, for instance, the shows we did later on, all the way up until our final tours, you can see the growth of the entire stage show. And a lot of that had to do with Nikki and DJ. Of course, DJ had great stage experience as well. I was the only one that had very little stage experience. So for me, it was a really steep learning curve. But I had two great partners to help show me the way. And it was only because of their patience and their knowledge and their experience that Sixx A.M. actually ultimately turned into a really great touring band.
Allora, il momento di svolta è il Crüe Fest, dove i Sixx A.M. partecipano e dove praticamente i ruoli sul palco sono in realtà i ruoli che poi ci sono sul disco. Quindi James è al centro del palco e poi ci sono DJ Ashba e Nikki che sono ai lati, e ci si aspetterebbe appunto un Nikki molto più prevalente, no? Più predominante, soprattutto poi mi immagino, avendo letto loro il libro e quindi conoscendo anche la storia di Nikki quando andava in tour. Eppure il suo è un corso accelerato, quello di James, per diventare frontman di questa band, e supportato, coadiuvato dalla grande presenza scenica degli altri due, che però con totale rispetto lasciavano a lui questo ruolo. Ma torno sulla mia domanda: il pubblico che a quel punto ha letto il libro The Heroin Diaries e vede Nikki probabilmente con occhi diversi, qual era la sensazione che si percepiva dal palco? James, by that time, people would have read the book, and so the whole perspective of Nikki was different. How did you notice the audience react to that? Did they have a different reaction? Did they expect something different from him?
You know, I think that I think the difference was that because of the book, a lot of people that knew of Nikki, they knew of his reputation, all of a sudden they knew so much more about him. They knew so much more about the struggles that he went through, the courage that it took to overcome that and get himself into recovery. Just how difficult that whole process was. So what I found when we would meet fans and fans would come to shows and we would talk to them was a great deal more maybe empathy for what Nikki had gone through. You know, even though most of his fans had never experienced heroin addiction the way that he had, thankfully most of them had not. they could still relate to him and they could relate to the struggles. And I think that the Sixx A.M. songs helped invite people into that world a little bit more and feel safe, you know, because if you were just reading the book, like I said, it was quite disturbing and it could scare a lot of people. But I think adding the musical element to it kind of invited them in and said, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Let's not just, you know, let's not just make him a product or something to observe. Let's actually discuss this and start talking about addiction and start talking about recovery. So from the very beginning of Sixx A.M.'s public life, we were always blessed with having fans from all different walks of life come up to us and tell us their personal stories and how grateful or how thankful they were that Nikki and us were willing to open up that world to them. So it was a very powerful decade, I'll tell you. It was really special to be able to be introduced to that many music fans with such a deep passion for more than just rock and roll. You know, it took it to a deeper level.
Gli ho chiesto appunto questa dimensione diversa con Nikki all'improvviso ambasciatore e i fan di Mötley Crüe capirono immediatamente che c'era molto di più e più che capirlo lo avevano letto e quindi sapevano che c'era molto di più che riguardava la figura di Nikki Sixx rispetto a quanto fosse la sua reputazione fino a quel momento, e quindi cambiò totalmente l'approccio alla persona. E allo stesso tempo per loro che James e DJ che lavoravano insieme a Nikki, vicino a Nikki, diventava un'esperienza sempre più intima, sempre più forte, proprio per la condivisione che c'era. E nonostante gran parte del pubblico presente non avesse mai avuto, ovviamente proprio anagraficamente, problemi con l'eroina, questo intero discorso di responsabilizzazione, di diventare ambasciatori di un messaggio da rockstar, come dire, pentita, diventò qualcosa di estremamente potente. Voglio chiedergli se ha mai avuto paura di Nikki e se ha mai avuto paura che l'hype del tour potesse portare Nikki a ricadere nell'eroina. It's basically two questions in one. Have you ever feared Nikki or Sixx? And have you ever feared that the hype from the tour could have taken Nikki back into relapse?
Have I ever feared Nikki? No. I have known Nikki through relapse, and was incredibly scared for him during that time.
Did he talk about it?
I'm sorry?
Did he mention the having, like, being fearful towards the tour?
You know, he's a really strong human being. I mean, when you look at what happened to his life at such an early age, many of us would have crumbled. But he is just a sturdy, strong human being at his core. He's a fantastic father. He works so hard to be a great father, a great husband, a great friend. He works hard at that every single day. So of course, when he went through his relapse, I was probably more terrified than he was. He probably knew he was going to get through it, you know. But for those of us on the outside looking in, we just felt helpless. You know, that's a very loaded question, and I could probably talk for hours about it. But I think to sum it up, I would just say that that now, if you were now, like back then, sure, I was scared. Now, I would have no fear. I am 100,000% confident that Nikki is sober for the rest of his life. He loves sobriety. He loves his life. I talk with him every week. He's happier now than he's ever been. And so I think some of that fear has dissipated. You know, we're older, wiser people by now, and I think that, you know, along with that comes a little bit more comfort and a little bit less fear.
Non ha mai avuto paura di Nikki direttamente. Sicuramente c'era una paura riguardo al rischio di ricaderci, una paura che aveva ai tempi che oggi non ha più, perché oggi è sicuro al 100% che Nikki è una persona che resterà sobria, pulita per il resto della sua vita, ed è una persona che sente ogni settimana e che sente più felice che mai ogni volta in cui ha l'occasione di parlarci. Però allora la paura ce l'aveva anche Nikki, e la paura era quella appunto di non riuscire a gestire e controllare, proprio perché era il primo tour probabilmente di un'esperienza nuova, e soprattutto di un libro e di un disco che di quella materia, di quel soggetto parlava, e parlava continuamente, anzi era il tema principale. Però la sua forza, perché ha definito Nikki Sixx come un uomo incredibilmente forte, incredibilmente centrato, un uomo che ha lavorato tantissimo per diventare un ottimo padre delle sue figlie, per diventare un ottimo marito, per diventare una persona centrata. Quella persona lì e quel carattere di Nikki è riuscito a portare il tutto a casa senza nessun tipo di rischio e bypassare poi ogni tipo di paura. James, I got a final question for you. A whole bunch of years later, has the Heroin Diaries soundtrack aged well?
I love that question. Yeah, it's an extremely proud moment in my life. And Nikki and I just talked about this the other day. It's an extremely proud moment in his life too. I think because when we were making that album, we had no idea what the heck was going to happen with it. We had no idea that we were even going to turn into a band. When we were making the album, we didn't even have a band name. And that makes it kind of sweet, and that makes it kind of special, because every day since we released that album has been icing on the cake. Do you know that expression? It's just like it's just been a wonderful gift in all of our lives. And the fact that here we are over a decade later, and the four of us can be talking from halfway around the world about music that we made up in a living room with no expectations. That's just a real gift. So did the Heroin Diaries album age well? I think it aged perfectly. I wouldn't change one thing about it to this day.
I wouldn't either. Actually, to be able to listen to it again, I mean, I'm always able to listen to it again, but I had the excuse to listen to it again. And it was a very good experience. It just brought back all the memories of why I liked it when it came out. Allora, gli ho chiesto se a distanza di 13 anni dalla pubblicazione, The Heroin Diaries soundtrack si è invecchiato bene come disco. E la risposta di James è semplice, dice che di quel disco non cambierebbe nulla, assolutamente niente, perché quel disco sì, assolutamente ha concentrato dentro di sé dei momenti di scrittura, di vita, di esperienze che sono ferme come se fosse un'incredibile fotografia. E di quello lui è estremamente orgoglioso, tanto quanto lo è DJ Ashba, tanto quanto lo è Nikki Sixx. È un disco che racconta forse in una maniera impeccabile quello che loro si erano prefissati di raccontare, e il fatto di aver vissuto quell'esperienza e di poterla ricordare a distanza di 13 anni, e il fatto che magari anche per persone come me quel disco possa ancora oggi avere un'eredità e che siamo qui a parlarne. Per lui, ecco, noi italiani diciamo che è la candelina sulla torta, gli americani e gli inglesi dicono che sia invece la glassa sulla torta. Per una volta credo che, non trattandosi di un reale compleanno, per quanto sia il decennale italiano e quindi candeline per noi, credo che la glassa sia effettivamente l'espressione migliore, proprio per la succulenza di un disco che effettivamente ha qualcosa di importante ancora al giorno d'oggi. Joe e Federico, se avete domande per James, o gliele fate direttamente o le traduco io.
Ma io Enrico, sì, avrei, se mi fai ovviamente da traduttore, perché il tuo inglese è fantastico, il mio è alquanto maccheronico. No, io volevo chiedere a James se lui si è trovato a cantare dei testi assolutamente particolari, perché venivano da un'esperienza diretta, così dolorosa, così forte, che raccontava un vissuto così particolare. Ecco, volevo sapere se lui aveva, seppur magari marginalmente, vissuto situazioni simili a quelle di Nikki, quindi non ti dico esperienze direttamente legate alla droga, ma comunque a quel mondo, oppure ha dovuto, tra virgolette, interpretarle da grande interprete qual è stato. Ecco, mi interessa molto questa cosa.
James, Federico's question is as follows. He wonders, like, you had to basically act in that album as Nikki because you were the voice. And so where did you start? Where did you take it from? And did you have you ever had any of the any similar experience to what he's been through? Where did you find the I don't know the grip, you know, to be able to sing all that as him?
That's a great question. Well, first off, it never felt that way to me at the time. Probably because, as I mentioned earlier, I brought in a few songs that were from my solo record, so I was already comfortable singing in that style. But it was really a real gift to be able to, and I like the way that you mentioned that I was almost playing a role. I was almost, you know, playing this character, because as we were writing it, we were all kind of writing it as characters. So what that gave me was the freedom to maybe step outside of my own comfort zone a little bit vocally, to try things that I wouldn't have necessarily done myself. So it gave me a little bit of a mask to hide behind. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this about Sixx A.M, but where DJ and Nikki are both very public figures, I don't do social media. I don't do any of that stuff. I was never comfortable with the public persona part of this. So I was so lucky that my guitar player and my bass player were both super famous people. So I never had to worry about that. I could just kind of be in the shadows and just do my thing. So it was, as a singer, it really gave me freedom to do things a little bit out of my character. And then as in public, as a human being, it gave me the ability to kind of hide behind their fame and not have to deal with that myself.
Allora, Federico, per te e per quelli che hanno poca confidenza con la lingua inglese, allora, chiaramente le esperienze non sono ovviamente le stesse, però lui ha dovuto interpretare, no? Il ruolo di Nikki nel disco, essendo lui la voce, e questo gli ha dato la possibilità di aggiungere strati alla sua esperienza vocale, di aggiungere strati alla sua interpretazione vocale, proprio perché aveva una sorta di maschera davanti, dietro la quale poteva nascondersi, proprio per mettere in scena quel tipo di personaggio. In più lui è una persona estremamente schiva, è una persona poco diciamo sociale, e quindi non partecipa a feste, non partecipa ad eventi, non si fa vedere, e quindi la sua fortuna, dice, che è stata quella di avere sia in DJ Ashba che in Nikki Sixx due figure molto predominanti proprio da quel punto di vista, che gli permettevano di non dover esserlo anche lui, e quindi di poter stare un passo indietro rispetto a tutti quanti e godersi, come dire, lo spettacolo. Joe, hai una domanda per James?
Allora, la faccio fare a te. Così,
come vuoi, fagliela.
Okay, più che una piccola domanda, ma un messaggio. Sto ricevendo un sacco di feedback da parte di fan italiani, sia di Mötley Crüe che di Sixx A.M. Lo ringraziano, sono entusiasti di averlo qua con noi e sono rimasti molto colpiti per questo piccolo regalo che lui ha fatto cantando quella frase di Life is Beautiful. Ha creato una bella cosa, la gente è molto contenta. E poi so che loro hanno suonato in Italia al Gods of Metal a Monza. Cosa pensa per l'appunto dell'Italia? Insomma, se gli è piaciuto, dell'audience italiano? Lo faccio fare a te perché hai condotto sempre tu, quindi è meglio così, Enrico.
Va bene, Gio, allora procedo. All right, James. Joe is getting, well, since he's the president of the of Mötley Crüe Italy, so he's the head of a very big fan base,
Cool.
which is representing right now, and he's getting a
Even
lot of.
for 6 a.m. Because he's in the world of Mötley Crüe.
Yeah, of course.
So Nikki, 6 a.m., James and Jay Ashby, Mötley Crüe, it's a big word.
So he's getting
for the fan base here in Italy.
He's getting a lot of good feedback because people, and including me, consider this a gift. So thank you very much for that. We're all very very thankful for you being here, and also they were extra happy that you sang that tiny part of "Life Is Beautiful." That was another gift.
I haven't sung in so long, so I appreciate that.
No, we all appreciated that. And
a lot.
And he
Thank
said,
you so much, James.
Hey, by the way, I was asked by my manager, do I have any?
Oh man,
this guitar, it's a 1951 Gibson J45. This is the guitar that we recorded the beginning of Life Is Beautiful on.
Oh wow.
Wow.
I bought it in Nashville many years ago. It's got a broken back brace right now, so it's not very playable, but I keep this very nearby all the time, and every time I walk by it, in my head, I hear the beginning of Life Is Beautiful.
Of course you do.
It gives me shivers every time. So I wanted to show you guys that this guitar has been with me for a long time, and it's got. We wrote a lot of 6 a.m. songs on this.
Thank you, man.
Thanks so much.
Okay, I'm gonna translate this a little bit and then go ahead with the question, with Joe's question.
Yeah.
Quella chitarra lì che lui ha preso è la chitarra sulla quale o alla quale è stato scritto l'arpeggio di Life Is Beautiful, il riff iniziale di Life Is Beautiful, e così come tante altre canzoni è una chitarra che ha tanti anni e che se la passa non benissimo, ma che lui si tiene sempre vicino per qualsiasi evenienza, e quindi ha deciso di farcela vedere. Joe's question was about Italy, that you visited because you took part of the Gods of Metal gig a bunch of years ago, and he said, what do you like about Italy? Do you like the fans in Italy? What's your opinion?
Oh, that's a great question. I got to tell you, and I was thinking about this morning in the shower. I was thinking about when we were touring and we did one show in Italy at a festival, and it was my favorite night on that entire tour, and I'll tell you why. Because Rammstein was headlining, and so after we did our show, we had a fantastic show, and it was just a thrill to be there. But then we got to go out to the sound booth and watch Rammstein, and to this day, it's probably my favorite concert I've ever experienced. So my one experience in Italy is one of my best musical experiences in my entire life.
Wow. Allora, erano stati al Gods of Metal, dove la sua esperienza, diciamo, dell'Italia coincide con una delle sue esperienze musicali più importanti di sempre, ovvero aver visto il concerto dei Rammstein dal booth, quindi dalla postazione del fonico, del mixer di sala, diciamo, anche se lì non si tratta proprio di una sala, e praticamente è stata uno dei concerti probabilmente più belli che lui abbia mai visto, e quindi il fatto che coincida con l'Italia per lui è un qualcosa di straordinario. James, I read that you already worked on a few songs, right, for a new 6 a.m. album. Is there any chance to see the release of that album in in the near future?
You know, I don't know what the plans are for releases, but when we got off the road in 2017, that was right around the time that we were getting ready for the anniversary of the Heroin Diaries soundtrack. So what we did is we went right into the studio and we did a few new versions of songs from the Heroin Diaries, but then we also wrote 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 more songs and recorded them. So we've had some really killer 6 a.m. music already recorded for a few years. At some point, that's definitely going to get released. I don't know when it's going to be. We were talking about doing kind of a best of album at some point. But, you know, we'll continue talking about it. Of course, with COVID, everything has just been put on hold and nobody really knows what's coming next. So at some point we'll start talking about that again. But there are already some really cool songs recorded. So someday I'm pretty sure everyone will get a chance to hear those.
Ci sono alcune canzoni che hanno scritto intorno al 2017, quindi sono brani già registrati, tra l'altro, quindi non c'è bisogno neanche di metterci mano. E chiaramente la situazione del Covid ha rallentato tutto, non ne hanno più parlato, ma comunque sicuramente è un qualcosa che accadrà nel futuro, e speriamo che sia il futuro più immediato possibile. Voglio veramente ringraziare James per essere stato qui, perché per canali come questo, per chi fa diffusione musicale, questi sono dei regali che non sono inestimabili, e abbassare, anzi ridurre le distanze tra Milano, in questo caso l'Italia, e Los Angeles, gli Stati Uniti, in un momento in cui veramente si fa fatica anche a stringersi la mano o a potersi abbracciare, credo che sia qualcosa veramente di grandioso. James, I really want to thank you, because in a time like this where it's really hard to get together, and for a channel as small as my channel, this is a gift that is priceless. I mean, it's really, there's no way to commute it into money. It goes all into emotions, and it's been a great present, man. And what can I say? If you want to bring Nikki next time, if you want to come back anytime, it's been great. You know, it's hard for us in this time of COVID, in these times of real trouble, to get together, to hug each other. And we erased any distance now between Italy and Los Angeles. I'm very happy. I'm very proud. Thank you very much, man. It meant a lot. It meant the world to us.
Well, thank you for having me on. And I have to say, you know, it means as much to me as it does to you guys. I can guarantee you that. You know, I think that a lot of people look at people like Nikki, people like myself, people like DJ, and they assume that that we are just so used to it, and we take it for granted. I can promise you, none of us take any of this for granted. So the fact that you guys wanted to spend your time getting online and talking to me, to this day, it still makes the hair stand up on my arm. I'm just a normal guy that's had a really, really exciting and unusual life. And so is Nikki. Nikki's just a normal guy that has had really fun and cool, exciting things happen in his life. But at the end of it, you know, to hear your enthusiasm, to be able to, you know, talk with you and hear how much that album meant to you, you've just made my day. I'm going to be happy the rest of the day. And so I can assure you that DJ and Nikki feel the same way. They're very grateful for you know, for people like you that keep this thing alive.
Of course, man.
So it's, you know, we're all grateful. And I would say, let's just do this every week.
Of course, man. Whenever you like. It's what you just said. It means even more. So thank you very much, James. You're a great guy. You're a humble guy, and you deciding to be here, it's really special. So thank you, and I'm very happy that we made your day. But just trust me, you made ours. So it's been a great experience. Thank you very much, James, and hope to see you soon.
James.
All right, guys.
Bye, man. Bye.
Bye.